On today's show, the Buccaneers are 3-0 on the season for the first time since 2005. How do Baker Mayfield's late heroics continue to keep getting it done for the Bucs? I'll discuss next on this edition of the Bucs Report. Let's get Well, hello and welcome into this edition of the Bucs Report Podcast, part of the Bucs Report Podcast Network. I'm so glad you decided to join me today. As always, this podcast is free and available on all the major platforms. My name is Dan Holmi. You can find me on Twitter. It's at DanCaps218. You can find us online at BucsReport.com. But the best way that you can help this show is to subscribe to the Bucs Report on YouTube and comment anything down below. So in this edition of the Bucs Report, the Bucs are 3-0 on the season for the first time since 2005. How are they getting it done? These late game heroics, Baker Mayfield, like I talked about with Steve Versnick last week, this cannot be sustainable, but they continue to keep getting it done. As I take a look at it, though, at some point the rubber is going to meet the road and the Bucs are going to fall. Because I watched this game not in real time. I had to work. Yes, I work a job here. And I looked at the score of the game, and it showed that the Bucs lost the game to the Jets. And I thought to myself, wow, this is not a good first loss of the season. Not that there is a good loss in any form or fashion, but to lose to the Jets. And then I refreshed my screen here, my phone, to see the other scores around the NFL, and they say the Bucs won. Again, late game heroics by your favorite team in mind, the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, winning 29-27. But how do they get themselves in this position? Let's dive into it here. I got Greg Auman a little bit later on the show as we talk about the Buccaneers, how they got themselves in this position, and talk about injury concerns, Baker Mayfield, special teams, and why Todd Bowles gets no love. But let's talk here first about how the Bucs get in this position in the first place. If we just want to rewind time here a little bit, first game of the season against the Falcons. Falcons took a lead with 2:17 left. Baker Mayfield responded. Rookie Emeka Egbuka caught a late touchdown with 59 seconds remaining. Texans in game two blocked a punt, got a long return pylon on late points. Bucs trailed late, but responded. Mayfield led an 80-yard drive. Rashad White ran in the winning touchdown, and the most recent game here against the Jets, Bucs blew a 23-6 lead in the fourth. Jets blocked a field goal and returned it for a go-ahead touchdown under 2 minutes. Mayfield orchestrated a drive to set up a field goal that gave the Bucs a 29-27 dub. I don't care how they get there. They continue to get there. They continue to defy odds. Baker Mayfield, the Buccaneers, the injury-strapped team continues to get it done. And now Mike Evans, the latest to add to that list. We don't know if he's going to be full go in the next game here. But all things considered, it doesn't matter in some ways who's in the mix. They continue to get it done. So like I said, in today's episode, I have the man himself, Greg Auman of Fox Sports, as he joins me, a true insider, covered this team forever. And we talk about the latest with the Bucs, the late game comebacks, Baker Mayfield, Jason Light, Todd Bowles, injury concerns. We'll talk about all of that. But first, check out this really cool gift that my wife made for me here. And if you want one of these as well, this is a custom-made Buccaneers cup. In this case, I have my name right here. She does these great art projects. She's involved in crafting and that kind of thing. If you would like a cup like that with your name on it, you can do that. Just follow the link here, or follow the email rather, Minutecast Media, and we'll hook you up there. But thanks to her for doing that, and a lot to be excited about around the Bucs here already early in the season. But it's not going to get any easier, right? As we know that the Buccaneers have the Eagles on deck, and all right, welcome into this edition of the Bucs Report Podcast. In today's show, we have Greg Auman of Fox Sports. Greg, thanks for joining me yet again.
Hey, thanks for having me. Hope you're doing well.
So we take a look at the Bucs here. They're finding a way to win these games, and it sometimes takes until the last minute. I wasn't able to watch the game live. I was kind of keeping track on my phone, and it said the Bucs lost to the Jets. I'm like, the Jets? That sucks. And then I hit refresh to check the other scores, and wait a minute, the Bucs won the game. So we look at these scores. It comes down to Baker Mayfield, some late heroics here. Just a quick recount here against the Falcons. Falcons took the lead, 2-17. Baker Mayfield responded to Ibuka. Texans blocked a punt. Bucs trailed late, but responded. Mayfield led an 80-yard drive. And then the most recent one here, Bucs blew a 23-6 lead in the fourth quarter. Mayfield orchestrated a drive to set up a field goal. So when we take a look at it, they're getting it done. I had Steve Versnick on the show last week talking about the sustainability of these late heroics. What do the Buccaneers need to do so it doesn't come down to the wire?
Yeah, I think they'd like to avoid all the drama if at all possible. It looked like one of those games. You're sitting there at 23-6, and you're thinking like, oh, they got an easy one for a change. And that obviously didn't work out that way. No, I think right now they're just trying to get through a ridiculous amount of injuries and kind of shorthandedness. So no, I think they'd like to be more in control. It's like Todd Bowles has talked a lot about having kind of a killer instinct late in games to put things away. And they had that in like minute 59 and 60 really well, which is a good time to have it. I think they'd like to have it a little earlier and have less drama, but they'll get there.
And a lot of this, like I said, has been orchestrated by Baker Mayfield. And there are certain things that already have me concerned about his play. The thing about him, I love, he's willing to do absolutely whatever it takes to win the game. Sometimes that's laying his body on the line, running the football when maybe he probably shouldn't, and then not taking the dive, but you can't take the dog out of the game. He is the ultimate competitor. How concerned are you about Baker Mayfield getting injured when he has a bit of a happy feet? He's not Tom Brady, who would sit back in the pocket and wait for a play to develop, and if there wasn't one, throw it away. Are you concerned?
Yeah, I think this is one of those things. We talked in the preseason with Baker about this, in that, again, you have two things going in opposite directions. There's the self-preservation that the coaches would like to instill in him. But like you said, there's that competitive spirit that wants to do everything he can to win a game. And he had talked, at least in theory, about wanting to know the right time for each, if you will. And I think what you've seen, unfortunately, is that he's been in a lot of these must-win situations. So for him to take off like he did in Houston and scramble for 4th and 10 and get hit so hard he kind of flips in midair, not ideal from a self-preservation standpoint. And then, honestly, I mean, he had a 33-yard run. It set up a blocked field goal ultimately, so it wasn't that great. But in terms of their late game, I think he rushed for 45 yards in that game, which is like fourth most ever for a Bucs quarterback. So it's one of those where I think he recognizes that he has to stop himself from putting himself in harm's way. That's trying to get out of sacks, that's scrambling, that's not sliding. It's a lot of different things that very much endear him to fans, but also put him at risk of getting off the field for a while. So, yeah, I think that's a work in progress. And I think the easiest way for Baker to do that less is to not be in positions where he feels like he has to do that to win a game.
Because that's where it gets difficult, right? Because as we go down the depth chart, it's Teddy Bridgewater. And, we've seen great things from him historically going all the way back to Minnesota. And I think, ultimately why the Buccaneers went out and acquired Teddy Bridgewater is because then it would have been Kyle Trask football that you saw, that Baker Mayfield had that hand contusion. And I think the feeling around the Bucs was like, we might get a real look at Kyle Trask football. And that's a bit worrisome there. It's oftentimes said that, if your backup quarterback can get you 1 or 2 games, they're worth having around. Do you think, big picture, it was the right idea to bring in Teddy Bridgewater, or should the Bucs have tried to go in with, somewhat of a fan favorite in Kyle Trask?
Yeah, I mean, I don't think they can think about fan favorites in something like that. I think they felt like, Kyle Trask had some, you want to say it's an advantage to have familiarity in this offense, but they're on their 4th coordinator in 4 years. So it's less of an advantage that way. And I think the overall lack of experience, like playing game experience, Kyle Trask has 11 passes in his career. And Teddy Bridgewater is a guy who, again, had 75 touchdowns in his career. So they're not close in terms of have you been there? Have you done it before? Teddy's at the opposite end, where Teddy's probably closer to retirement than he is the start of his career. I think the other thing that I think worked in Teddy's favor is that I think because of that experience, I think he was able to add a lot more to the quarterback room in terms of in meetings, even on the sidelines, being able to say, hey, Baker, they're doing this. If you look at this, you should be able to get this. It's essentially like having another coach on the field. I think he got the job as a quarterback, but I think the added benefit is having the wisdom and the experience of someone who's been in the league for a decade, has seen these defenses, has seen these players, and can help Baker prepare in a way that, unfortunately, Kyle Trask just can't. And I think the fact that here we are in week 4, Kyle Trask is still unsigned, not even on a practice squad, suggests that the rest of the league kind of feels that way too. There's been lots of injuries to other teams' quarterbacks where they're having to scramble and bring people in, and they still haven't got to the needing Kyle Trask part of their desperation. So I think, again, the Bucs would rather never find out and have this year be a lot like Kyle's 4 years here, where he's a backup but doesn't really get to do anything just because their starter doesn't go off the field. Whether they get to that point or not, I don't know. But so far, they've been fortunate to make this a moot conversation.
They're the Bucs. They're getting it done here. We'll talk about offense here. We know that Baker Mayfield is the big contributor, but we take a look at the wide receiver room. Emeka Egbuka, big time. Now, listen, there was a lot of comments about did the Bucs draft the right guy, and I think it's glaringly apparent now that, yes, he was the right guy. The one-hand grab, I mean, wow, that, continues to play in the highlight reel in my mind here. They're getting it done, minus Godwin, minus McMillan, and now concerns surrounding Mike Evans as well. Talk to me a bit about the depth just at the wide receiver position. You also saw trusty old Sterling Shepard played a big role in the last game as well. Talk to me about the depth at the wide receiver for the Bucs, and what does it mean? One, Godwin, who is slowly edging closer to return, and the latest with Mike Evans as well.
Yeah, it's probably their deepest position, and that's even with having to cut some guys that are now on other rosters elsewhere. I think Egbuka's just been a godsend for them. I mean, to do everything he's done in his first 3 NFL games, to have 3 touchdowns the first 2 games, some huge catches from, like you said, the one-handed grab down the sidelines, 28-yard catch on that final drive. Some would argue had another just as good catch that wasn't counted as a catch. So I think he's helped them a ton in terms of getting through this initial month where there's no Godwin, where there's still no Jalen McMillan. Their receiver depth, again, in summer, talked a lot about that. And now, as you mentioned, Mike Evans goes off the field with a hamstring injury. We don't know how long he'll be sidelined, but it would be surprising if it's not at least one game. They could get Chris Godwin back from his ankle this week, which would be huge, but still very much shorthanded, at least for another month and change. And the depth has shown up. I think, Sterling Shepard's been very underappreciated in all this. To have the clutch catches he's had, I think he had 4 for 80 on Sunday. Some really big catches. You think about after they lose the sideline throw to Egbuka, they have that screen to Shep, and Shep just works his way through about 3 tackles to just muscle his way to be there in position for a winning kick. If he doesn't make that play, again, it's a whole different storyline, and we're talking about something very different right now in terms of Bucs collapsing after losing a 17-point lead in the fourth quarter. And then I think even the younger guy, Cam Johnson's the guy that hasn't really made an impact on offense yet, had a 54-yard punt return. Tez Johnson, I don't think has done anything yet, really. I think he had 1 catch that got overruled to an incompletion. Ryan Miller has had a touchdown already. So, yeah, their depth has shown up, and it's kind of had to get them 3-0 so far.
And, you can kind of see the future a little bit because we don't know how long Evans is going to play. Chris Godwin, we know when he's engaged, he's fully healthy, is one of the best receivers in the league. But they do have great options in the future in Jalen McMillan and Emeka Egbuka. So, that's Jason Light, kind of just a master class of seeing down the football field a little bit, if you will. Key contributors as well is the running back room. As you take a look at Bucky Irving, Rashad White, you got Tucker in the mix there. And that's a bit of an interesting story as well, as that Rashad White was perceived to be, the number 1 running back, and Bucky Irving came and kind of supplanted him like, wow, Bucky ball is here. But we've seen glimpses of greatness from Rashad White here lately as well. Talk to me about the running back position here. It's a luxury of wealth. I was talking about earlier on another podcast with Tucker. He would be probably a starting running back on another team around the NFL. Talk to me about the depth at the running back position.
Yeah, I think it's one of those where, Rachaad White was the starter, but that's the starter when the Bucs were the worst running game in the NFL 2 years in a row. So to see Bucky Irving come in and change things last year to really elevate the big play aspect of their run game, huge part of why they go from last in the league to a top 5 run game. And I think they both have played well. Obviously, Bucky really had to grind for his yards Sunday. Didn't have a lot of big plays. I felt like a lot of that was kind of, they have the lead. They want to run the ball just to salt the clock away. Needed to do that to win. Rachaad White obviously had a great game in Houston in week 2 to get the 3 runs for 37 yards in the middle when the offense was lagging a little bit, and then to come up big and get a 2-yard touchdown to end the game. Just massive. That's why you keep both. That's why you have both. You look around the league, there's a lot of teams that are keeping a second back at a starter level. You think about Detroit last night with David Montgomery, who's probably their number 2, having 150 yards and 2 touchdowns and just taking over a game. The idea of having fresh legs in the second half is really helpful sometimes. Tucker's in a tough spot because he's just a distant third here. I don't think he had any carries in week 3. I think he had 1 in week 2. Kind of in that same boat he's been in, where, again, if he gets the chance, he's shown he can do a lot, but he's not really getting that chance very much right now. So I think as Josh Grizzard figures out this offense in terms of how they want to use things, how they want to balance the workload, between 1 and 2, they'll find ways to get Tucker involved as well. You see that pony look with both backs at the same time, pretty sparingly still. That's still like 1, 2, 3 snaps a game, but I think that's something they could really do more of and get a lot out of. But yeah, their running game, I think of their offense as starting with their running game. Baker Mayfield has 6 touchdowns, so he's a big part of it. Don't get me wrong, but I think they would like to think of themselves, especially when their offensive line gets closer to full strength, as being a run-first offense and a team that can dominate the line of scrimmage that way.
Now, listen, special teams oftentimes can help you win a game or lose a game as well. Chase McLaughlin had a nice bounce-back game. There was some concern out there. I think he was concerned that they were going to be trying out some different kickers there. But, oftentimes what is said, if there was a better option there, then they probably be on a team, that they wouldn't be in the recycle bin, if you will. I think at the end of the day that Chase gives them the best bet at that position. How concerned were you with Chase when, just historically he's been so lights out that he struggled in a game? And, talk about how difficult that is in a position like that you've got to kill it every time or people are willing to show you the door.
Yeah, Chase has been remarkably consistent his first 2 years in Tampa. So to have him have 3 misses in the first 2 games, potentially costly misses, I think that's you can wear through hard-earned patience really quickly doing that. So I don't know that his job was in jeopardy. I think had he had the same problems this week, would have been closer to that. They're paying Chase a lot of money. So to move on from him is a significant financial decision. And again, the guys, for the most part, the guys you're getting in mid-September aren't necessarily the most reliable guys in the world either. So I think a lot of people were happy to see Chase get back to himself. 5 field goals in a game matches a Bucs team record. Gramatica did that once. And big kicks too. I think there was a 54, a couple long ones in there. The idea that you can have a kick block, that's not necessarily Chase's fault that the kick gets blocked, but the idea that Bowles would go back to that unit and trust that unit with the game on the line. Didn't make any effort to try and go to the end zone in the last minute there. Just lined up, put himself in position, sent him back out there and won a game on his leg. So no, I think Chase, has been a remarkably consistent kicker since he's been here. You would argue, I think, by the numbers, the most accurate kicker in Bucs history. But again, like you said, you have to earn that every week. You have to your reputation is what you did the last time you were on the field. So hopefully for him, it's more consistency moving forward.
So injuries have been the theme of this season. Right out of the gate, there was a lot of optimism surrounding the Buccaneers, but then the injury to Tristan Wirfs. And I think that, that, of course, is the biggest setback from this team, but they found a way to rally around that, moving Graham Barton around, moving Bredesen around, Michael Jordan, these different guys. But you take a look at the injuries that are facing this team: Wirfs, Godwin, Kalijah, McMillan, Evans, etc. How big of an impact has injuries had on this team this year? And you got to think that maybe the Bucs would have won some of these games this season had they been a full go. I know that's not too crazy of a thought, but injuries have had to have a pretty significant impact on the Bucs so far this season.
Oh yeah, I mean, a huge impact. I mean, they're 3-0. Don't get me wrong, but I think it's been a lot more interesting as a result of those injuries. Offensive line in particular has been just a crazy rash of injuries there. To have again, they knew they'd have Wirfs out, and then to lose Gedeke and to lose Mauk, to lose Mike Jordan as a replacement starter. You know, the line they had on Sunday and the line they won with on Sunday is as patchwork and as duct tape a line as you're going to find, where you have two guys making their first NFL starts, one making their NFL debut. Charlie Hack is not supposed to be a starter. He plays every snap. Bredesen and Barton, as you mentioned, out of position. Nobody is in a comfort zone in that five, and yet they found a way. A ton of penalties early, 5 holding penalties on one drive, but a drive they still score on. So I thought that was emblematic of them being able to push through their own mistakes, settle down a little bit, less flags as the game went on, and then grind out a win. I mean, they executed a 2-minute drive to win the game with that same line. I thought it said a lot that they didn't make any rash decisions, didn't bench, either Luke Haggard or Elijah Klein when they had multiple penalties that were holding things up, and stuck with them. I think part of that's that they really didn't have very many options. I mean, they had players that had just joined the team literally in the last 3 or 4 days. So this has worked out for them, in that they're 3-0. If you get Wirfs back, now that allows you to put Barton back at center and Bredesen back at guard. The left side of your line looks fine. You got to figure out the best way to kind of get through with the right side of your line for a couple more weeks at least until you get Gedeke back, and then find the best option at right guard as well. But yeah, they've been through a lot there. And that's not even getting to, as you mentioned, Cansey and Godwin and all the other injuries they've had to deal with on other parts of the team.
So you take a look at the Buccaneers right now. I mean, I'm on a high right now. You've covering this team for so many years. You got to be on a high. I know you cover the NFL at large at now as well, but 3-0 on the season. And there's always haters, always doubters. And I think that oftentimes the Buccaneers play better as the underdog with a bit of a chip on their shoulder. I think that you could put Baker Mayfield in that column as well. And Todd Bowles, every year I hear Todd Bowles is on the hot seat. If it's clock mismanagement or, the inability to want to go for it, he gets results at the end of the day. So what is it about the Buccaneers organization generally? And what is it about Todd Bowles that they never get the credit? I mean, you take a look at NFC South year after year after year, they just don't get any love. What gives?
Yeah, I think their status just being in the NFC South has kind of gotten them written off as the best team in a bad division for a couple of years. They only have one playoff win the last 3 years, so it's not like they've really done much in the postseason to change that. But you look at last year, I mean, they beat the Eagles, they beat the Commanders, they beat the Lions, they beat the best teams in the NFC as a part of their season last year. They weren't able to get past Washington in the playoffs, but I think they're minimized nationally because they haven't gotten past the second round of the playoffs since their Super Bowl in 2020. So that's kind of what it takes to build that currency nationally and to be taken as more than just a division champ in a bad division. I think Todd Bowles has done a great job to stay true to himself and not change his demeanor or his approach to the game. Got an extension this offseason. So, I mean, there's people, trust me, every game, they've had some rough patches in these first 3 games. And there are these moments where people are like, oh, is it too early to start saying, fire Bowles? And there's people legit calling for him to be fired. And they work through things and they win a game. So, I think there's people that don't like Bowles just because they don't like Bowles. I don't know that any amount of success or time is going to change that. But I think he's won a lot of people over. I mean, I think you think about this as a franchise that's never won back-to-back division titles, and he's done it all 3 years. He's been the head coach, has been to the playoffs all 3 years, has won more games each year as a head coach than he did the year before. And I think they're probably in good position to do that again this year. So that on-field product, I think, goes a long way. In terms of giving Todd something that he can point to that's like, this is why I'm doing what I'm doing. I think that's something where, I think nationally with each win they get, again, if they can beat the Eagles on Sunday here in Tampa, that will do a ton for them to put them up into that next tier above whatever 8 or 9 on power rankings. That's a huge win if they pull it off. They've beaten the Eagles before. They've handled the Eagles about as well as anybody has. It's a tough thing. I mean, they've won 19 of 20, I think, right now coming in. So even if they lose that game, if they play well in losing that game, they're not going to do anything to hurt their standing nationally.
All right, one last one here quick for you, because I know you're a busy guy. How do you see the NFC South shaking out at the end of the season? I know this is going to require you to look into your crystal ball a little bit here. Did the Bucs do it again yet this year? How does the NFC South shake out?
Yeah, right now the division's a lot like I thought it was going to be. I think you could see the Bucs at the top and the Saints at the bottom, and you were curious how 2 and 3 shake out. The Saints have had their struggles and continue to look like a team that's cap strapped and dealing with bad quarterback play. To see Carolina come out and beat the Falcons 30-0 is a game changer within the division. I mean, a dominating shutout like that. Carolina hadn't shown very much. Falcons had been there with tough opponents before that. So that's kind of the race now is those 2 1-2 teams, if you will. Can one of them get to a position to challenge the Bucs or challenge for a wild card? That's the biggest question now for this division. I mean, division hasn't had a wild card since the Bucs in 2020. So the one way you can kind of dig yourself out of worst division in football conversation is to produce multiple teams in the playoffs and to win games outside your division and those kind of things. So I think of this as still very much the Bucs division to lose. They have a 2-game lead on the Panthers, 2 and a tiebreaker on the Falcons. They have to take care of those division games. The next 4 are a decently nasty stretch for the Bucs when you think about having the Eagles, going to Seattle, having the Niners. I'm blanking on who the 4th game in that stretch is, but Detroit. They go to Detroit. So that's 4 really tough teams. They could be a really good team, and if they went 2-2 in those 4 games, you wouldn't think less of them for it. Their last 10, after that, there's only 3 teams with winning records in those 10 opponents to close out the year. So I think they've got some downhill skiing ahead of them if they can just get to that point and be in good shape and start getting healthier. So that's how I think of how the South's shaking out right now.
All right, Greg Auman from Fox Sports. Thanks for doing this. We'll talk to you again next time.
Oh, no problem. Have a good day.
You too.